This is video 2 for Public Relations, Chapter 18, and this video is going to go over kind of how to do public relations writing, where the focus should be, and talking about persuasive writing. So how do you write for PR? There's kind of three main foci in PR writing, and they kind of build upon one another. So I'm going to go through them in order. So you're going to start with the message, and then you're going to think about your audience, and then you're going to look at the media and which medium it is that's going to be the best, or which group of media is going to be the best in order to get that message to that audience. So the message for you, if you're a PR professional, is going to be either a product, a program, or it could be the whole organization itself. But in order to get that message out, you need to know what you want to accomplish. And the clearer you can be about your goal, the more effective you're going to be. So your purpose might just simply be to inform. And when we go back to those key terms that I talked about in the last video, this is where we can kind of see that deliberate and that planned part of those terms. You need to know it needs to be intentioned what you want to do, and it needs to be a systematic response where you understand what you want to accomplish and how you're going to accomplish it. So then we're going to move on, once we know what we want to accomplish and how we're going to accomplish it, to the audience. So now you need to know who you're speaking to. So this is where we get the part where we have the public interest and we have our two-way communication. So you're going to have a whole group of internal and external audiences. I kind of touched on them very briefly in that first video. You might have media relations, you could have publicity. If you have a product or your organization has governmental affairs, you might have, if you are working, you might have like FDA stuff that you need to adhere to. You might have industry relations, trade publications. Again, some industries are regulated by the government, some are self-governed. Then you're going to have kind of quasi-internal, quasi-external audiences like investors, shareholders. If you're doing an annual report, this is something that's for an internal audience, but it is published externally and it's held by like the FCC. You might have internal communications. You might have internal research you need to do. You might have outreach through things like philanthropy. And again, when you do things like social media, all of those different internal and external audiences get wrapped up in social media. So you've got business-to-business communication, you've got your own media, and then you have other things that fall under PR, like event planning and speech writing. And hopefully you don't have to worry too much about crisis communication, but sometimes you do. And again, when we talked about strategic communication and integrated marketing communication, you get things like account planning. So you need to be able to target messages and tones to every single one of your internal and external audiences. But the most important thing is that your message is consistent to all of your audiences. So if you go back, you've got that message. You need to be consistent in the message to each audience, but you need to be able to target the audience and tell them that message in a way that resonates really well with them. So this is about storytelling, but it's about storytelling, targeted storytelling. So once you've figured out your message, you've got your deliberate planned message, and you've got your public interest and your two-way communication, now you need to know how you are going to reach out and to deliver that message to that audience. And those first two parts, the message and the audience, are going to inform the medium. So each audience might be kind of programmed to engage with a certain media more, or they're going to engage with it differently. And every medium does things well and does things poorly. So again, when we talk about StratCom, we talk about IMC, we start to think more in terms of campaigns, not in specific articles, not in just one news release, not in just one ad, not in just a print ad or a TV ad or a radio ad. You start to think, again, this is the consistency. You're thinking in terms of how you're going to tell that message to the audience through multiple media, because people are going to engage differently with each of those mediums. So if you want someone to, so you want to take advantage of each medium and you want it to be consistent in how you tell that story. So real quick, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about each medium and what it's good for. So like for TV, you can show rather than tell. You can utilize the fact that it is time-based, that it's visual, but you also get audio. So you can target news broadcasts. You can send out video news releases, which we'll get to in the last segment. You can do product placement, and you can do standard advertising. Radio, you can really segment to your demographic. So if you know you've got specific audiences, you can hone in your message to that audience. Listeners tend to be loyal to a couple stations, so you can target very specifically because you know a lot about the demographics of the people who tend to listen to those stations. So you can get your message across very specifically to people. Print tends to be good for deep dives, things that are maybe a little bit more nuanced. You want people to pay a little bit more attention or spend a little bit more time. You can target newspapers, magazines. People expect to engage more deeply with print, but you can't take advantage of audio and video, obviously. But nowadays with things like fake news, there's a little bit more credibility to things that are in print media versus online, where people feel like maybe there's a little bit less gatekeeping that's being involved. Online, everything goes. It's all in one. You kind of get all of the good bits, but also all the bad bits of TV, radio, and print. But remember that the same rules about writing for online apply whether you're doing PR or whether you're doing journalistic writing. So people expect customization. That can be a challenge because, again, people expect that online they're going to get what is tailored to their interests. So you need to be very specific when you're writing to your audience. You also need to understand that attention span is maybe going to be an issue. So, and again, credibility, you don't kind of get what you would get from print. But you can take advantage of some of the kind of AV functions and hopefully engage with people. You can use linking and things like that, which can be really useful. I'll get into that more specific a little bit later. And again, with social media, you need to do a lot of data analysis because, again, the individualization and the targeting is, people expect it. Now, there might be a lot of changes to this in the next 5 years or so. There's a lot of changes to privacy laws, especially if you're engaging with anyone in the EU. This is where you're getting all those cookie pop-ups. So cookies were the way that marketers were able to target so well because we could tell where you were going and what you clicked on, what things you read, what you looked at. But now people are very concerned about their privacy online, and so we're seeing lots of articles about how we're going to be able to advertise in a post-cookie world. So, keeping in mind that these things are going to change and that we need to be able to adapt and to shift. Don't neglect your internal audiences. So that can be employees. It can also be management who are going to be making decisions based on the stuff that you pull out. But it also means shareholders. It means the people who are giving the money to make the organization run. So make sure that you don't neglect your internal audiences, especially with the consistency in your messaging. You want to make sure that people get the same message, whether they're internal or external. And I just want to end talking a little bit about persuasive writing. In terms of how you can persuade people to actually believe the things that you want them, that you're telling them in your public relations message, there are 3 core beliefs that you need to at least project in order to persuade people with your writing. Now, these 3 core beliefs are that people are essentially good, that, you think that people are intelligent or at least educatable. You never want to underestimate your audience. You never want to talk down to people. But you also don't want to overestimate what they know. Like the example in your book that you might be talking to someone who has a PhD in philosophy about investing. They're very intelligent people, but they may not know about the topic you're talking about. So don't talk down to people, but don't assume that they're experts in your field. You also need to assume that people are changeable, that you can in fact influence them. You're trying to persuade someone. If you don't think that they could be persuaded to change their mind, then there's no point in talking to them. So you need to at least project these 3 core beliefs in order to be a good persuasive writer. And so just 4 tips to do good persuasive writing. 1, kind of going back to the same things, develop a clear objective in your writing. You need to be really clear about what that message is that you want to convey. Be a good listener. If you're a good listener, then people are more likely to then trust what you have to say when you actually say it. Using familiar language goes back to the not underestimating their intelligence, your audience's intelligence, but not overestimating their knowledge. So using familiar language makes things accessible to more people. And being empathetic and understanding goes back to the idea, again, that people are inherently good and that you're not there to just push your agenda, but you're there for them as well. It's that 2-way communication. And it's the kind of going to the public interest, which then allows people to be open and amenable to your message. And to just finish on this, remembering that you need to build credibility and trust. Character matters in PR practitioners, especially, you're working with the public or you're working with journalists. They need to know that they can trust you. Otherwise, if you're a journalist, you're not going to put out what they have to say. And if you're the public, you're not going to trust what people are telling you. You should assume the audience's goodwill, but don't take advantage of it. Do not turn clients, the public, or the press into enemies. You do, that's it, you're dead in the water. It takes a long time to build this trust up, and it can evaporate in seconds. So don't take for granted, while you can assume goodwill on both the audience and, the people you're working with's behalf, never abuse it and never take it for granted. Because as soon as you do, then that's how you lose it. So if you kind of look at these as some kind of templates and some ways to start off with, then you've got kind of a good start on how to kind of approach writing from PR.